Hey, Scott, so talk to us. You have something that's the biggest trap that dentists fall into that kills both their profit and their passion. So, what is that?
Michael, thank you so much. You have such an amazing reputation. And, it's funny because my answer to the biggest trap that people fall into is very simple. Doctors, they are at the mercy of the law of diminishing return. Everybody in our industry, except you, because you're so smart, the dental marketer, they focus on nothing but volume. Literally, our doctors get on the hamster wheel and they think the harder they work, the more they'll make. And the reality of it is it's exactly the opposite. As we all understand the 80-20 rule, the less you do, but at a very high level, then the greater the return will be. So I say volume is what destroys every private practice owner's passion, their life balance and harmony, and above all else, because with volume, you suppress and squander and diminish all profitability when you are in a capacity-driven, time-based relationship business. So that's really my piece of advice. Less is more, quality over quantity, and you'll set yourself free.
I like it. Interesting. So, then what key metrics should a practice track to measure profitability versus volume?
Well, what a good point. For first of all, stop focusing on production exclusively, focus on people, okay? But in terms of the impact you have on patients, is derivative of one single solitary number, and that's the average visit value. So if you take any patient you see and you say, I have doctors all day, they say, we do comprehensive dentistry. I say, really? And yet you're doing about 3 or 4 or 500 or even $1,000 an hour. You're doing comprehensive one tooth. That's what you're doing, not comprehensive dentistry. So the average visit value is the greatest equalizer across all forms. Everybody wants to talk about number of patients they see or size of practice they have. But at the end of the day, we're only making an impact based on what people say yes to and how fast you're getting them healthy. So that's average visit value. Obviously, we can look at case acceptance. People love to talk about case acceptance and they brag the greater the percentage they have. Mm-hmm. I think that's a very stupid number. That's like saying the quarterback completes all the passes, but they never get to the end zone. So I don't care what your case acceptance is. I care about what's the final answer. Okay, so we call that the size of the yes. That's the number that matters, okay, not some made-up percentage.
Gotcha. So break down to me a little bit more of that. The size of the yes. How do we get more of those?
I teach a 4-step leverage process: diagnosis, case acceptance, prepay, and schedule control. And so let's just start with the output of the answer on the equal sign is only going to be as big as the input on the left-hand side. So it all comes back down to comprehensive diagnosis. We call it the pillars of health. It's very simple. Everybody would know what these are, but it brings about an objective way of assessing where patients are and moving beyond the problem-based dentistry to what we call possibility-based dentistry. That's the crystal ball of the future. And so building a larger opportunity, the vision of an outcome for a patient, that's what's going to give you a better chance at greater case acceptance. So to bring it back to a very simple point, you're asking size of yeses. People can only say yes to what we give them a chance to say yes to. It's not the patient. That's diminishing treatment. It's before it ever gets to the patient that treatment is diminished. So if we have clarity over our clinical philosophy and every patient is held to that standard of excellence, you're going to give them a greater opportunity to say yes to more meaningful dentistry. And ultimately, that's going to drive the value.
So is that why volume would kill the profitability here? Because your new patient exams are like, hey, we got to get in, get out, let's get this going kind of a thing, instead of, hey, let's make this comprehensive. What would be a reasonable amount of time you would suggest for like these new patient exams or sitting down with the patient?
If I had to throw out a number, my whole shtick is that every doctor's different, and I don't believe in a cookie cutter, one size fits all approach. Every practice does about the same thing, but you customize it to the individual patient. So in dentistry, there are principles and pillars, but it's got to be customized to team style, modality, area of the country, whatever it is, insurance, fee for service, etc. So I think that if I had to just stamp it out, typically 90 minutes with an opportunity to intake the patient in a relational form, meaning not in the operatory, or at least not with their mouth open. I call it open the mind before you open the mouth. Then you have the state of the union. This is the diagnostic protocols. Engage the patient in seeing a vision. And then depending on your hygiene strategy, or if you're a specialist, as to whether you're going to move into treatment planning or bringing them back for a follow-up appointment. The way we look at it, you have a discovery visit and you have a decision visit. Those are just fancy terms that other people call other things. But really, that's the way. We want it to be a substantial, moment in somebody's life where they're making the decision about a long-term plan for their overall health. So you can do that in less than 90, but let's say 90. I'd rather have more time and get done early than have less time and run out of time. And I want to just jump back to one more quick thing you mentioned. So why does volume diminish profit? Well, aside from the obvious, Amazon's a website, so they can drive lots of volume because they got mostly now robots, but also other people doing things. They have no confinement of space or time. They literally deliver around the clock. In dentistry, we have finite space. Okay? We can expand, but what we have, finite space, finite team. We can hire more, but eventually run out of room for even them. And we definitely have finite hours. And so it all comes down to optimization of the asset. And so let's say, for example, you do 1 crown per person per hour. That's a certain number. But if you did all those crowns in one person, it would take maybe a third of the time, probably 25% of the time. So obviously, the leverage factor on value is dramatically greater. So it's very important to understand because all the profit is in the expansion of the value of time with the leverage of complete health dentistry.
Okay, interesting. I like that. You mentioned something. There's a relationship, right? You open the mind before you open the mouth. There's a discovery visit and a decision visit. If you were to give us the framework behind that, so you sit down with the patient and you're like, hey, what's your favorite hobby? Is it that, or is it more specific set things you got to ask?
That's such a framework. Well, you're so smart. And that's what I love about the dental marketer, because you provide a principle-based framework for helping attract quality patients and really building a brand value asset for your clients. It's very amazing. So what I want to do, I don't mind the small talk. There should be some rapport building, some humanizing. But in the intake process, we want, one, to establish where the patient's goals are. What do they want to accomplish today? What are their goals with their health? How do they even view dentistry? We have to have empathy for where they are before we can take them to another place. And then the second thing, which this is probably the best framework I could possibly give you, is I want to redefine what health is for the patient before we start picking apart their mouth. We're going to say to them, patient, people come to us. We're so happy you're here. Smart move. But people come to us to achieve optimal health. And then we unpack that for them. So that now, instead of thinking, what does a patient want? It's called no dentistry and to leave as little money behind as possible. In fact, in the patient's mind, they're losing if they have to do dentistry. So we have to flip that and say, no. The more dentistry we can do for you, the greater value we bring to your life and the healthier you become. Walking out of here doing nothing is bad news. Walking out of here with room to move to optimal health, that's really the reason you're here. So we redefine what I call goals and expectations so that before we start picking apart their mouth, diagnosing, treatment planning, all these things, you understand the idea. We're elevating the mindset, then we're educating to bring them up to that level.
Gotcha. So that's what the end goal is. And then at the very end, when you're ready to work in the mouth, they should be ready for that.
Well, sure. By the time you're culminating, yeah. And you're building trust because you're talking to people. The new patient, even existing patient, but new patient is skeptical. Everybody understands that. If people had 6 choices of places to go, the last one on the list would be to the dentist. And this is just the reality. Part of smart marketing is understanding the reality of the psyche of the customer. And, my process is about building better customers. Your job is you're getting them the best patients in the area they live. That's very amazing. For us, we believe however they enter, they should leave better than you found them. And that's what your experience should be. Everybody's, we do great patient care. Well, it seems pretty transactional to me. So tell me where you're actually baking in true relationship with your patient experience. So that's why I like to make sure we're bookending the experience in this way.
Gotcha. Okay. So then what have you seen? What are the top 3 inefficiencies in most practices that secretly drain profit besides the volume, right? Because I feel like we're always thinking of that. We're like, hey, we need new patients.
Right.
And more work done. We need to open up more days, weekends. But besides that.
So look, number 1 is wasted opportunity, wasted time, space, people, opportunity. It's like somebody walks into the morning huddle and they're surprised by something they see for the day. I mean, like, well, it kind of was there yesterday too. So it's like everybody's just constantly being reactive And that results in a lot of waste in all aspects. I'm not just talking about like supplies and ordering. I'm talking about, whether it's open time or just literally patients walking out the door. The second thing is that people are not committed to bird in the hand, right? The patient is here and all of a sudden they're trying to exit to the treatment coordinator or to the front desk. They're on the phone, checking somebody in. They're dealing with insurance. They're doing all these things that deprioritize the culmination of the experience. Because now we have to dedicate time to follow up. And then I think the third, we can get into like P&Ls and accounting if you want, but the third biggest way is really just not bundling treatment, is diminishing down into onesie, twosie, or even quadrant. And we're not talking just about the volume of visits. So I went with volume of visits and volume of patients and measuring anything by quantity, okay? And not at least rubbing up against what the value is. But then when we just go down into the details in dentistry, the profit is diminished when we've got to constantly turn over or expand, or it takes, somebody gets healthy, but in 8 visits instead of 4 visits. I don't speak of patients in dollar terms, but that patient, they paid the same over 8 visits, but they're not worth the same. And so I also think if you want to go down to the next level, you talk about it's not cost per lead. I don't believe in cost of anything, but it's what's the income per lead, what's it ultimately turn into. It doesn't matter how much it takes to get them. It matters what are you doing once you got them. And so when we think of, not all procedures are created equal. Not all dollars are equal in terms of what the profitability is. We could use silly examples like Invisalign versus an implant versus 4 crowns. The dollars are all equal. Profit, not so much. Nobody thinks about dentistry beneath the surface. It's a big mistake.
So then what's a low-hanging fruit revenue opportunity most dentists completely overlook?
I think the easiest one is just not knowing what the next step is for every single patient coming in today, whether they need updated records, whether they need the next quadrant schedule, or they need the next, whatever. I think that's low-hanging fruit. We have a philosophy of treating every patient like a new patient every single time. Pragmatically, what interval of time are you re-comprehensive examining every patient? At what interval of time are you taking full updated photography? Of course, now the big thing is the digital scans and the AI. So you ought to be doing that definitely once a year. So utilizing technology to make sure we're constantly expanding, moving to the future, whereas most treatment plans are all predicated on the past, either existing preconditions, problems, and then it's just never updated into real time. So tightening up the schedule and knowing that when you lay out for a patient, mostly they're going to comply. It is us that gives them either too much wiggle room or that sabotages the process. Mostly patients will comply. We just have to exert a little more control, and we call it being a leader and a guide.
Interesting. So Scott, in real world examples, how have you seen, and if you can almost give us like a script of this, how have you seen a practice owner or just us sabotage this?
Yeah, the biggest sabotaging, I would have to say, if there were one commonality, it would be the insurance as a scapegoat versus a utility tool. It's where in the operatories, does my insurance cover it? Or even a team member says, well, we can start here, we can do the most important, and then we can wait for this until next year. Or it's literally verbiage is the biggest sabotage because we're always going lowest common denominator instead of greatest potential and possibility. So I want to say a more specific example, value-based scheduling, what we call it, but treating a crown prep and a crown delivery, while the doctor time is different, but treating them in the schedule the same versus just because you prep the tooth doesn't mean you're going to deliver the tooth and then not prep another tooth. There's no rhyme or reason in the way most people schedule. They're just scheduling by time, not by value. That would be another example, I would say.
Okay. So then the way they're scheduling their day, the doctor time is huge. So for you, optimally, if you were to look at someone's schedule and say, this looks beautiful, what does beautiful look like?
We anchor appointment in the morning, worth 2/3 the value of the day, done with the goal by lunch, new patient opportunities and pathway to health presentations in the afternoon. And there's no doctor alive that should be A, satisfied, or B, performing at less than an average, okay, of an average of somewhere between $1,000 to $2,000 an hour. And not because it's about money, but because Otherwise, you're just rolling patients through a tooth at a time. The other thing is, I like to keep it simple. I talk a lot, but I like to keep it simple. So we think of upper right or lower left. I say, stop doing that. Just think of upper, lower, left, or right. Just break it into halves instead of into quarters. It's a simple concept, but guess what? It's common sense to the patient, right?
Yeah.
And so these are the things that would make a schedule more attractive.
Gosh. So if a dentist wants to start making these changes tomorrow, like they're listening to Scott right now, this episode, and then they're saying, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do exactly what he's saying. What are the first 3 actionable steps they should take?
Really appreciate the question. The very first actionable step is I would look at the last 2 weeks of your schedule and the next 2 weeks of your schedule. I would see, what you liked and didn't like, and then compare and contrast against the future. And I would start setting better schedule parameters around how you want to work. Number 2, I would get rid of anything to do with speaking in terms of visits, and I would present only complete visions for the patient's health every time. That means we're giving the patient an opportunity, size of yes, for all of it, okay, with some incentive to do so. And then number 3, I would create one of those little jars. In the old days, they would say, well, if you say a bad word, you put the money in the jar, something like this. So a bad word in dentistry is insurance, is cost. The only cost is cost of inaction. Everything else is an investment. So we have to clean up the vocabulary. I would say those would be the 3 most important things. If somebody wanted a bonus and do a little digging, they can look at what average visit value is, what average recare patient treatment plan value and new patient treatment plan value, and then look at the case acceptance of such. Those would all be extra credit.
Number 3, cleaning up the vocabulary, the cost. So we don't mention cost, or we don't mention insurance?
Well, you mentioned investment. If somebody hears, well, the cost of this crown, or the cost, immediately they think, well, do I really need it? What do we want to do with cost? First of all, cost is bad. I have a hole in my roof. There's a cost to fix it. Okay, versus I want to paint my house a beautiful new color. I want to make an investment into value. And so it's the same term, it's just different psychology. So investment, we want to do as much as possible as fast as we can. Investment has a return. In this case, a return on their health. A cost, sunk cost, can't get the money back. Gosh, I'd rather wish I didn't have to do that. Okay, so one, again, is negative energy and least than, and one is positive energy and greater than. That's kind of the shift we want to make.
Gotcha. Okay, interesting. And so then what's, to you, vocabulary change? And then the bonus was specifically?
Knowing the numbers, just doing a deep dive on current numbers.
Okay. And then once we know the deep dive of the current numbers, we want to change that, right?
We know the reality. So I guess I'll give you one more. The most significant moment in every owner's week or doctor's week is a 15-minute sit down with the treatment coordinator, review the last 7 days of their life, every patient they presented opportunity to, and review the next 7 days of the schedule. This is reflection, but it's future casting. It's moving forward. And the whole entire objective is shift to more proactive decision, strategy, preparation, etc., than reactive.
Awesome. Scott, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much. But before we say goodbye, can you tell our listeners where they can find you?
You're after my marketing heart here. Yeah, it's very simple. I write some books. That's my gift to the industry. We give them away. So you can get a look at dentalsuccesstoday.com. It's just a simple dentalsuccesstoday.com. And you can find me there. And thanks to Michael, by the way, get a book. And I would just say it's an honor to be here, truly. Such a great reputation. As I told you before, you practice what you preach, and that's the kind of person our doctors should be doing business with. I appreciate all that you do for the industry.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate that. So that information can be found in the show notes below. So definitely please reach out to Scott. And from that point on, thank you so much for being with us this morning.